Hello and welcome to Empires of Today. I'm your host, Rafo Arriasa. We've got our 4 topics stacked up, starting with an update on the Iran deal, new update on what's going on in Cuba. We've got a situation in the UK where they're planning on banning all social media for 16 and under. And of course, the UFC terror plot, which was thwarted by the FBI. Let's go ahead and start with Iran. So, in Iran, essentially, we have a deal. It's been released. At least it was leaked at first, and then the Trump administration did go ahead and confirm what was on it. It appears that the Iranians have fully agreed to open the Strait of Hormuz without mandating control over it or securing tolls of the ships coming through the Strait of Hormuz. It has not, however, agreed to stop funding its proxies. That's completely left out of the agreement. In addition to that, it's considering, once again, and this was covered before, that Lebanon is included in the pact and that Israel is supposed to leave the 1/5 of the territory that it currently occupies. Of course, this is an issue because Israel has not agreed to leave. So, considering that, from the looks of it, the deal is pretty much dead in the water if Israel decides not to leave. But the fact is that it's kind of strange that we pretty much got to more or less where we were before. The Iranians have always been agreeing to not have a nuclear weapon, yet continuing to develop. There is no real agreement for them to stop enriching uranium. And of course, there's absolutely no agreement to stop funding terrorism, which essentially was one of the main points of actually starting this war, is to completely castrate the Iranian regime from being able to conduct its terrorist operations, and of course, from being able to essentially exist in the powerful position that it's been in for quite some time. At this point, I guess we'll have to wait until Friday to see the exact details of everything, but it's not looking too great. On to Cuba. Essentially, they are facing a more dire situation almost every single day. We are up to 22-hour power outages in Cuba currently. If you recall, when I started this show, they were at 15-hour power outages, which is insane. They actually had an emergency meeting of the primary council of Cuba. It's called an extraordinary plenum, which is only called for in situations of extreme distress and turmoil nationally. In addition to that, right before pension funds were supposed to get paid out, there was a massive robbery of the main central bank in Havana. So, I mean, this is just more evidence that the Cuban government is on its last legs. The fact is starvation is starting to take place. 10% of infants are dying. That is a 10% infant mortality rate. And for what it's worth, there's absolutely no end in sight for this Cuban regime unless they agree to completely change and completely allow freedom for their people. At this point, it looks like maybe one of the reasons that they're trying to wrap up Iran with what seems to be not the greatest deal is specifically because they're trying to switch focus onto Cuba. That could be the case, but in the end, really hoping and praying that something gets resolved in Cuba for the Cuban people. It's getting really bad over there. Next up, we got the UK social media ban. It looks like the government is planning on completely banning 16 and under individuals from having access to social media. Now, what's interesting about this is that they are expecting the companies themselves to enforce this or face multi-million-dollar fines. The fact is they've admitted themselves, it appears that 59% of citizens in the UK don't even think that this is going to stop 16 and unders from actually accessing social media. And if anything, this is essentially adding to the massive surveillance state which the UK is becoming. Anybody who simply wants to access social media is now going to have to provide a credit card and government ID as well as facial recognition just to access things like TikTok, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram. I don't know how effective this is going to be in actually solving the issues that it's seeking to solve. From the looks of it, the UK is just simply going deeper and deeper into some sort of surveillance state, trying to control the rhetoric that people are putting out and trying to control what people are saying online. I mean, this could lead to a lot worse things in terms of freedom of speech than actually what it could help in terms of saving children from the predations of what happens online. Of course, I believe that there should be limits put in place to help kids. Of course, social media is extremely addicting. I, for one, haven't used general social media for about 10 years now, for many of these reasons. But the fact is that the UK every single day seems like it's just going deeper and deeper down the wrong path in terms of just limiting its people from expressing themselves and in terms of really just enforcing extremely arbitrary laws that just limit people's freedoms. On to our last and final topic. We have a wild situation where the FBI actually thwarted a terror plot that was planned on the the UFC event that took place on Sunday. It appears that there are over 20 people that are being investigated in this situation. The ringleaders, one of which is a 19-year-old called Tyson Proper. That was his name exactly. He's 19 years old. It appears that the reason the plot was thwarted was because this individual's mother actually called in and tipped off the situation, saying that her son had been acting very strange, meeting people online, had bought an AR-15 with tons of ammo. It appears that these individuals were planning on attacking the stadium, the octagon that the fights were being conducted on, using drones. So drones armed with bombs in order to essentially get people out through a corridor where there would be snipers. It appears that 46 people were listed in this journal, including, many millionaires, some billionaires, conservative pundits as well, celebrities, politicians, all sorts of people, in order to foment a revolution. This was, according to them, in order to start a revolution. Of course, all the sites that these people have visited, the groups that they are part of, appear to be left-leaning. There is definitely left coding to this. And considering that, at this point, we really just have to talk about how there is a permission system set in place for violence at this point. People are really not taking seriously that the rhetoric being thrown around is causing significant issues with violence. People are not feeling safe. People think that there are wild conspiracies going on and leading them to plan out such terror attacks. Keep in mind, this was not an Islamist terror plot. This was not a foreign terror plot. This was 100% domestically driven, which is definitely a major issue. That's all we have for today. Went a little bit over on some of those topics, but next time, definitely going to try to keep it under. Definitely like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.